Good morning, this is Mona, and this is my morning view. Today, Winter Edition 2025. It is Thirsty Thinking Thursday. It is the Winter Edition because we have about another week left of winter. That doesn't mean we won't get snowstorms after. It just means that officially winter will have arrived. However, the birds are saying, oh, spring has arrived. I said that wrong. Spring has arrived. Spring. The birds are singing. That is a plus. Have not seen a robin yet. Doesn't mean they're not out. Just haven't seen one yet. And there's still a brisk chill in the air. I'm out here with my hair wet from taking my shower, and I'm feeling the cold on the hair. So, yeah, the temperature says it's 40. That is, it could have greenhouse effect as the sun hits that in the morning from time to time. Right now, it's like a muted. A little bit of shade, a little bit of sun. So it's, at any given time it could say that it's warmer than it is. So that can't be trusted. But, it feels like about 40. It does, even with the breeze. There's an occasional breeze that's coming by. That is the weather report. And Thirsty Thinking Thursday. So yesterday, while I was on my live, there was a question. Why do I tithe? Now, I was not prepared to answer. Not prepared in the sense that I've studied. I have not studied it since yesterday. I haven't picked that up. I haven't searched through the scriptures and, gotten some profound revelation. This is just impromptu. Because from the time I set my phone down, I went to work. I came home. I had to go kind of babysit at a doctor's appointment for my daughter. So it became this, it was a day. And at the end of the day, I went to bed. And that happens. Life in between all of it, right? So, and not that I was intending, because if I was intending to do a study on why do I tithe, it wouldn't be my morning view. It would be something different than that. So my morning view. For Thirsty Thinking Thursday. Impromptu. Why do I tithe? And I said yesterday there's many reasons for why I tithe, and that I wasn't going to get into it because I had already started a thought process in another direction. So I didn't want to squirrel moment and get off of that topic. I wanted to give it what it's due, right? Give it its own space. Give it its own day. Thirsty Thinking Thursday is a great day to think about, why do I tithe? All right. So let's go back to the part where the earliest that I can remember in the Bible were offerings. Okay, offerings. Because tithes and offerings are different, but they're connected. So Cain and Abel brought offerings, and Abel brought a more acceptable offering through his attitude. Had to do with the attitude. And God saw the heart of Cain, and he saw the heart of Abel, and so he knew that there was an attitude adjustment that needed to take place, and he gave Cain the opportunity to do that. And Cain didn't do it. Instead, he went and murdered his brother. His heart got harder. I was thinking this morning about when you think you know everything, it's when you show you know nothing. You have to remain teachable. Cain did not want to be teachable. So the offering that they brought to the Lord was there because of the sin issue. At this point, they had to offer up the offering in order to satisfy that sin issue. Later on, when they established the tabernacle and the priests and all of that. They performed the offerings for the people. The people were part of it. They brought their offering. They were in on its, they were participants. They weren't just onlookers. They were participants. And then the priest would offer for the nation, for the entire nation. That's when they were onlookers, because the priest came in and did the sacrifice himself. Did all the preparation, did all the stuff for it. And they were participants in the audience, that 13th player. All right, so that's the first part of the offering. It was mandatory that you bring offering to the Lord because a sacrifice had to be made. There had to be an atonement for sin. Sure, they learned it from Adam and Eve, who was taught to them by God when he had to slay an animal and clothe them. Then the next time I really see this tithe and offering aspect is Abraham. Now, there may be some other occasions in between, and I'm not the all-knowing scholar, so you have other examples. By all means, throw them into the comments. Put the address for those, the scripture, the at least the book. We can at least get a book and maybe a chapter. That would be great. But I'm not good at those. So, you'd have to do a little bit of probably Google research. The scripture, you throw in the verse and Google comes up with the where it's found. And that's how I do it. That's how I do it. We have these tools. We might as well use them. We don't have to work harder. We just have to work smarter. Now, I don't take Google's answers for questions as my mainstay of information. I don't. But when I'm looking for references, that's a good place to go. As far as where to find the address in the Bible. Where is it written in the Bible that this says this? Sometimes Google doesn't know the answer. And I have to do the hard research and find it myself. And usually do, because I happen to remember that it's there. And then I start relating it to the story, and I'm like, okay, where is that story at? Where it could be in multiple locations, right? You got 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, and sometimes they overlap in the stories, and the Gospels. I mean, they're notorious for overlapping, and some stories being in some and some stories being in the other, right? Different viewpoints, different perspectives, different views. They had a different morning view. All right. So anyways, so Abraham had to go fight some kings because Lot had been taken, and some servants and different ones, and he's like, oh, okay, we got to go get them back. And so he goes in. His servants become soldiers. His servants are not soldiers. They're shepherds. They're cooks. They're handmaidens. They're well, the girls didn't go fight at the time, but they're the gentleman's gentlemen. And so they have plows, not swords, So he takes his servants and he goes to battle against 5 kings. Man, and the kings had soldiers. They had battle-hardy individuals that have probably studied the act of war. Well, in the day. They probably practiced. They probably worked out. They probably did all the stuff you have to be a good soldier. for the king's service. Abraham took a bunch of servants up there, and he kicked some butt. He kicked the butt of these 5 kings. Hi, Jerry-Ann! So happy to see you there. So, when he got done kicking the butt of these 5 kings, he took the spoils. He took the spoils, and as he was going on his way, he runs into Melchizedek. Melchizedek was the king of Salem. Salem is the word for peace. So, like Jerusalem, it has peace in the word. So he was the king of peace, right? Who does that represent? We all know that he's a picture of Jesus, because it talks about where he comes from. Go check that out, right? So there are some scholars that believe that he was Jesus himself. And Abraham paid him a 10th of the spoils. Melchizedek did not ask for the 10th. Abraham gave him the 10th. He felt this thing inside of him that says, I have to give them a tithe. I have to give Melchizedek a tithe because it's the honoring thing to do. Right? And he gives him the 10th. Thereby establishing, quote, the tithe. Again, it was out of his heart and out of the abundance of spoils that God had given him. And then we see when the temple, not the temple, the tent, the tabernacle, when the tabernacle was established, and they were giving the priests their duties, and and they were divvying up the portions, and they were talking about the stuff that was going to be handled by the Levites, and the duties of that, and it had to do with they were not allowed to own land. Now we notice that in the New Testament there were some landowners. It may have been from various ancestry. They may have married into another tribe and gotten it. We're not going to go with how they ended up with the land, okay? But for the most part, priests were not allowed to own the land. So the Levites were there serving the tabernacle, serving the people, serving the Lord. And so the tithes and the offerings went to the Levites for their sustenance, for their abilities to survive. There were some sacrifices and offerings that had to be burnt to ashes. Nothing left. Nothing left. Because they had to tithe as well. But what were they going to tithe? Well, out of the abundance of the people that brought the tithes to the storehouse. So if you go to church, or if you're being fed by someone online for spiritual guidance and such, it would honor them by paying a 10th to the storehouse. God does not need our money. It was Cain's attitude that left him the deficit. He knew what God wanted of him. He knew what was expected of him. Now, in the tabernacle time period and forward until Jesus, you had tithes and offerings. Your tithes were your first fruits. It was the first fruits of your labor. It was the thing that you brought to the Lord that, let me tell you something, all of it's God's. Your very breath is God's. So all of the money that, oh, I worked hard for my money, it's all God's. If you've given yourself to the Lord, that should be undisputable. That everything you own as a servant belongs to your master. So he asked for 1/10 of it back for the storehouse. He doesn't need it. But there's others that do. Churches pay for their electricity. Churches pay for a lot of community things that take place. Churches have food pantries. Churches have building repairs. I know our building needs repaired horribly. No, it needs to be repaired well, good. That's what it needs to be repaired, because it's already horrible. But we don't complain. We're thankful that we have it. And it's a great space. Just needs a lot of repairs. So they started cutting trees for the road, so I apologize for the noise. And I don't have my hearing aids in, so you're not getting the mic feed from my hearing aids, which makes a much better video. So moving right along. There were actually 3 offerings that were brought, and they were 3 types of tithe. You had 1/10 that went to the storehouse, to the church, to the priests, to, you know, whether it was back then or right now or whatever it is. It was 10%. It's a money test. It's a test on whether you want to hoard that 10%. I need every penny of it. And thereby not trusting God for the rest of what you may need. There are 10% that went into a savings in order to make the trip to Jerusalem, because it was mandatory for the men, and sometimes they took their families by the way they could afford it, but for at least for the men, it was mandatory that they made this trip 3 times a year: Passover, Pentecost, and Sukkot. Mandatory show up at the temple. If you didn't show up for the temple, well, there was situations that had to be addressed. Now, if you were going to be away and out of the area, because say you were a merchant and you traveled and maybe you were in Rome, or maybe you were in Egypt, or maybe you were, somewhere else, and you couldn't make it to the thing. They actually had a makeup day. They had a rain day for that. So you had a second opportunity to be there. All right, that was for Passover, I believe it was, for that one. May have been for Pentecost. I don't think it was for Sukkot. That was more of a celebration anyway. So, with that, All right. Although Yom Kippur was Day of Atonement, so maybe you needed to be, I don't remember which one it was, but there was a rain date for one of them that they could participate after the fact. The third tithe was 3% that went to the poor. Because guess what? It wasn't the government's responsibility to take care of the poor. What? So in this day and age, you know, if giving 3% to an organization to take care of individuals, that is actually part of the tithe. We're not taught that because in churches today, it's all about the storehouse. We got to put money here, right here, where you're being fed. We have to put money right here in the church. Yes, the church needs money, but God doesn't need money. The church needs money. Boy, that one was extra loud. This is what happens when you start your morning view late. So here they are, 3 tithes, 3 offerings. Offerings go for Passover, Pentecost, Sukkot. They had other little offerings too, wave offerings, and that was moving into the Feast of Weeks and that type of thing. But those are the major things. Offerings are not mandatory. Tithing is not mandatory. It is from the heart. It is between you and God. It's not between you and the church. There are churches that have mandatory tithes. They take it right out of the paycheck. If you know, you can have an allotment set up. Tithing is between you and God. It was between God and Abel, and it was between God and Cain, and it had to do with the attitude. And if you don't tithe, it's why. It's not why do you tithe, it's why don't you tithe. It's in the heart. Offering is above and beyond. Offering is from your abundance. Okay? Tithing is 10% of what you make. It's what you've earned. I don't like saying it that way, because like I said, it's God's. It's all God's. It's 100% God's, and He just is asking for 10% to check your heart. It's for you. It's to check your heart, to see what your heart is feeling in giving. Because you give with thanksgiving and joy. If you're giving disgruntledly, you're giving like Cain. There was a time when I had everything just taken out of my out of my account automatically, and it took the worship part out of it, and I started to make it feel like it was a bill. Here's the bill. I paid God first. Check, check. Okay, Verizon needs to be next because they're due on the 2nd. You know. And it's not a bill. Let's move on to another reason why I tithe. And that is Malachi. Everybody's heard Malachi. You have robbed me. Where have I robbed you? Oh, in my tithes and offerings. Everybody hears that part. But the part that sometimes they don't hear is, now prove me herewith. Prove to me that your heart is right. That you can't serve God and mammon. Right? Mammon is not always... People look at serving mammon as being greedy. being greedy. That you keep striving for more and more and more and more and more, and you just keep wanting more of it. That's part of it. There's also that stinginess of, I can't trust God enough to give this 10% of my finances. I can't trust Him enough. So I got to hold on to it. I got to hold on to this 10%. That's serving mammon. Now, I'm not saying that that's what you do when you don't tithe. I'm saying that those are some of the reasons why people don't tithe. Okay? So in that, when they're like, oh God, this 10%, man. And the more you make, that 10%'s more, right? But you don't feel it as much as when you don't have a lot of money. Because when you don't have a lot of money and say you have to tithe $10 because all you made was $100, you tithe $10 and you're like, man, that was some gas money. That could have gotten me to work. That was my coffee money. Ugh. I need my coffee to function. No, you need Jesus to function. You can work around the coffee. So what happens in Malachi, he's saying, prove to me. God already knows the heart. He knew the heart of Cain. He knew the heart of Abel. Okay? So when you're looking at prove me now herewith, He already knows the answer. He's wanting to show you the answer. He wants to show you the reason. Open up my heart, God, that I might see anything inside that doesn't belong there. Right? Let's move on into Malachi. That I will not open up the windows in heaven and give you such a blessing. You don't tithe, there's a blessing blocker. Because why aren't you tithing? It's not why do you tithe, it's why aren't you tithing? See, we've lost all the Old Testament values because in the New Testament we're given more freedom. We don't have to tithe. We don't have to bring offering. Jesus was our offering. He was our offering for atonement. He was actually our offering for everything. And so the requirements of the law were nailed upon the cross, making a spectacle of the enemy. So it blocks a blessing when you don't tithe, but when you do tithe, it opens up the windows. Let me tell you a little bit about windows in this format. And I've talked about it here before. Sluice gates. The actual translation for that is more like a sluice gate. Do you know what a sluice gate is? Many of you know what it is, you just don't recognize the term. It's those gates that open up the water gates to like a dam. You have a dam that has these little things that go out. Those are sluice gates. And they open up to release the pressure off the dam to go down into the valley, or if the reservoir needs to be filled or it needs to be lowered. The sluice gates are there to manage that. Okay? There are sluice gates for mills where the water is diverted a certain direction from its natural direction. It still flows in the direction it's supposed to, but there is a gate that opens it up to a space where it is diverted and used so that it can be used as a tool, as in the mills, the water mills, right? Those that come from mining territory, sluice boxes. The water is poured into the sluice box and it comes down and it washes all the impurities away, And what is left is the heavy stuff, the gold, right? He will open up the sluice boxes of heaven. He'll wash away the impurities. He'll give you sustainability in order to work better. The blessing is opened up and poured upon you like the gates of a dam. And that's not always monetary. So if you're looking at it from a monetary aspect, you're missing it. Doesn't mean it's not monetary. God can absolutely bless you monetarily. He did it for Abraham. He did it for Isaac. He did it for Jacob. Jacob had to go around a couple of times working for Laban. But you got to remember, Jacob had a lot of work that God had to do in here. We don't have to tithe. It's not really mandatory anymore. But why would you rob yourself? Why would you keep that 10% for yourself when it could open up the blessings of God? That it doesn't block the blessings. Because there's other blessings other than monetary. There's health, relationships, and there's wealth. Relationships in all categories, to include our relationship with Him. I don't want anything to block that. Don't want anything to block that. Tithing has a rich heritage from the beginning. Offerings. Each offering that was brought during those 3 times that you brought your offering. That may have been when you brought your tithe. Some tithe offering. They are very different, but there was 3 times when the men had to come into Jerusalem and bring. I'm listening to that noise of them grinding the trees. Jesus. Oh, I am so sorry. Let me see if I can do this. That noise. Sorry about that. Jesus didn't come to replace the law. He came to fulfill it. We tithe out of the abundance of our heart. We give offering out of the abundance of our finances. Do not go broke bringing an offering because you feel guilty or like you have to keep up with everybody else around you. If you may have $500 in your hand, God may not tell you to give $500. He may tell you to give 5. If you give $500 when God told you to give 5, you are in disobedience and you just lost it. You might as well have just thrown it away. Because your blessing is on the obedience. It's not a feisty Friday moment. I gotta calm down a little. Of course, if he tells you to give the 500, give the 500. But it's all I have. And he may or may not replace it with money. Why do I tithe? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? And with that, I will end my Thirsty Thinking Thursday and hop on over to YouTube. So, blessings, everybody. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow for Feisty Friday while my dog is barking at the tree people. All right. Bye. Thank you, Jerry Ann. Thank you, Jamil. Thank you, Jennifer, for watching. Blessings and have a great day. Now I can say bye. Bye.